she might be doing, they will be on, we can't start till one of them comes. Cynthia might be on Zoom too. She told me she wasn't sure which version she was with. Anyway. This is unlocked.
They are. Kids test. Like, I didn't get your test. Where is it at? And I was like, oh, never mind, my bad.
My 13-year-old tries that
Oh,
line sometimes.
What's that?
I handed it in. She just hasn't updated the grade book.
So, that may be true, especially if your teacher's like me.
If I run into her at King Supers and I ask,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
Can you hear us, Rihanna?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just waiting for Cynthia at least.
Okay.
Great. I know when Cynthia is absent, Catherine leads the.
Right.
What happens at 12?
It's okay, we got some.
Oh, there she is.
Or not. Or we did.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in the mood lighting room.
Oh.
Can you hear us, Cynthia?
Yes, sorry, I was hoping to be there in person, but my husband's working late, so I had no childcare.
Yeah.
Excuses.
And are y'all able to hear me okay?
Yeah. And we're
Okay.
just waiting for you to start. Catherine hasn't signed in yet, but everyone else is here.
Perfect. And I heard from Catherine that she should be here. She just she also has no childcare, so has to log off at 8. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks so much, Tracy, for sending out the packet. And our first agenda item is approval of the previous month's minutes. I read through, did not see any new updates. Anyone have any updates before? Okay, then I move to approve the minutes from December 18th, 2023. Is there a second?
A second.
Great, minutes approved. And Tracy, I'll just sign that next week if that works.
Yep. Perfect. That sounds good.
Or next
month.
week. Oh, next month. That's gonna be a lot. It's every week. Okay, since I'm not in the room, I'll just make sure if there are any members of the public here.
No.
And then we'll just move on to our new business. First up, we'll continue with the icebreaker, and I put myself down. I don't think anyone else had volunteered last month, and it's been a while since I've done it. Wait, so my question for y'all tonight, and I really hope I haven't asked this one here already because I've asked this before at another meeting. If you are going into a library, brand new library, what section would you gravitate towards first? And I will start, and we'll say that I don't know the Dewey Decimal section well enough to know where this would be, but I love going to the cookbooks in the nonfiction area and kind of checking out what's new. And it's more aspirational. I don't really do anything with them, but I just love to browse that area.
Yes.
Just so you know, I think it's around the 630s or 640s.
Oh, I was 600 in my pets. I thought I was close.
That might be the only one.
That's good. That's good. And I'll just pass to whoever would like to share next.
I can go next. I usually go straight to the computer lab and see what they have there. So if I go to a brand new library, that's what I check out first. So
I can go. I often get a library card because I am an avid e-reader. I love reading with a Kindle, and that way I have more access to more e-options, and I love that. But for in-person, I do like looking at DVD collections and seeing how deep an old movie selection is.
go. I guess I haven't been to a new library in a while. But whenever I come to our library, I immediately go to the new, like, YA and middle grade fiction because I have 3 readers that just, like, devour everything, even the e-books. That's really looking for new books all the time. And super grateful at how many new things seem to come through there. So, and then for myself, I'll just go to like whatever the staff recommends at Brea. I like that at bookstores too. I feel like it gets me out of my rut and it makes me just look for something, you know, be open to new things, I guess.
Go next. So for me, I'll go and look at the gardening. I don't do a lot of gardening, but I'm just fascinated by, you know, people who know what they're doing. And so, I don't have the space. I have a few garden beds. So I kind of like to look in those areas. For the classroom, I like to get over to the juvenile section and check out books. Sometimes, you know, depending on the theme, I'll even check out a stack of books just for a basket that our library, because I notice our school libraries are actually thinning down their stock because they're becoming iLabs. So more like STEM building area. But I feel like our libraries are kind of getting smaller. So I'll come here and get books.
You don't work at Burlington Elementary, do you?
No, Indian Peaks next door. Is Burlington the same way? I'm trying to remember. Okay, because I taught summer school one summer. And yeah, it was kind of slim pickings. So I do like the kid books.
All right, I'll go. I was chuckling because I've moved so many times as an adult that I kind of have this system of evaluating the library wherever I'm moving. And this is tailored to me, by the way. I'm not saying that these are the most important areas in a library, but I think I've said before that when I do move, one of the first places I go is the library, and I get the library card right away, like the first 2 days. And then I assess the library, and I go to, in the children's section, I go and look at graphic novels, and then I go and check out their fairy tale section, because that's what I love. And then in the adult section, I will go to the craft section, I will go to the biography section. I want to see how big their history section is. I take the rest of it in, but and then if they have a used book sale or shop or anything like that, I always check that out.
You're very thorough. It's nice.
I have just found that if everything is in good shape and they have at least a modest collection in all of those areas, I'm probably going to like living there. I have moved to towns where there was like one 50-year-old knitting book and like a couple other ratty things from the 70s, and then I'm like, it says something.
Do you have
I
something?
can go next. I always just default, and I haven't actually been to very many new libraries because we've lived here so long, but I always just default to the children's section now. That's just where I would gravitate and want to know that there's a robust collection there, especially now with my daughter. So it's just probably my priority if we were to move is that selection.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I think about going into a new library somewhere, my first thing is not the collection necessarily, it's the layout of the library. It's like, collection's a part of it, but I don't really like, but if we're talking about a new library that like I'm going to be a part of that community or something, I don't know. I'm kind of whatever is on my mind. So I don't have a method like you do. That's pretty good, like to evaluate. But in general, I gravitate towards nonfiction, and if I were just browsing, I would just go through the new nonfiction and just see what's out.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's everybody too.
Great, thanks. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on. Actually, before we do so, are there any volunteers to do this next month?
I can do that next month.
Awesome, thank you so much. That'll be great, Fiona. Cool. Okay, so next up on our agenda, as y'all can tell, we have a shorter agenda today. Really, our biggest agenda item is going to be hearing from John about action plan update and library director report. But I did want to ask if anyone was able to attend the city training for new members. I appreciated that they offered it. I unfortunately could not make the one for new chairs, but I was curious if anyone was able to attend it and had anything to share back with the group.
I just thought it was fantastic, and I'm so glad that I went. And I have now been on this board a year, and I did get the recording, other documentation that was sent earlier from when they weren't doing in-person trainings, and it does not compare. Just being able to hear and see, hear the questions and meet the people who are asking the questions and meet the people who are answering the questions was very valuable to me. And what was the other piece? I learned a lot. There was a lot I didn't know, even now. Not saying like I should know a lot, but like I did not know. It didn't hit me, right, that this advisory board and any advisory board is really to advise council. That's the main focus. And I know that that's been said, and it was probably part of the interview for this board, but there was something about the way it was presented and the context in which it was presented that really drove that home. And I appreciated that. I also thought that they just provided such great information about, the typical stuff, what your role is, and how meetings should go, and the open records law, and all of that. And there were really good questions from the audience that may not have been included on a static slide deck if that was sent around. And I got the ABCs of parliamentary procedure. I have one of those. Which I really wish, that I'd seen maybe 15 years ago. But I have it now.
So I'm looking forward to them sending it out. Do you think the recording of it will be as good?
So I did, that question came up on Saturday, and I heard that meeting was not being recorded.
Oh.
Because they couldn't get someone to record it. I heard that they were going to follow up with a recording with the same content. Yes, so that tells me that they probably have to put it together first.
Are they still, one thing that struck me from the previous recording, and I've heard this before, but are they still recommending you get a separate email address for, are they?
That came up, and I was surprised because I do think that that's a question that's come up in this room.
No, it has here too. We've discussed it. It was part of Orion somewhere at some point.
In fact,
it was discussed that it's recommended
next
that you open your, maybe you actually said it. I don't remember, but somebody here did say it, that you should start a brand new email address that is dedicated to any city business. In case there is an open records request, so that they don't have to go through everything.
Yes, and that was actually the advice of the city attorney. I wrote down.
Interesting.
So I wasn't really clear on that either.
You run the risk of me not seeing emails then.
Well,
If I-
yeah.
When Tracy goes to email and I'd be like, oh, you did?
It wasn't clear whether it was like a you can do this or like
Right.
you should do this.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like me and you have 24,000 unread messages, so.
Jamie,
That's my
was there
homework.
anything, Susie, I'm with you there. Jamie, was there anything else like that? Because I think it's been a while since I've taken it, and I know a lot of us came on when it was not being offered. Is there any other like informational pieces that you would think would be useful for this group to know?
I'm looking at my notes. I think probably the other most pertinent thing was they included a very foundational, excellent presentation on speaking to or responding to the media. What to say, what not to say. And I don't know that will come up for this group. However, it could. So I was appreciative to hear in such plain, accessible language. These are the nuggets that you have to keep in mind when you are asked to comment on or be interviewed by a representative of the media as a board member.
Thanks. Well, definitely we'll keep an ear out for that part in particular when they do get that training out. Thank you. I was hoping that someone had been able to go and would be able to provide a little bit of context for this group. Any questions for Jamie on this? Okay. Great. Well, then let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So, John, we're moving on to old business. The action plan update is first.
So there's a couple of things I just wanted to share with action plan. One is basically 2023 and where we ended up, and there's a couple of outliers I wanted to bring up, and then what at least my initial thoughts are moving into this year, and either forming something similar or something different, which we're still working through. So with this 2023's action plan, one of the items was sent in the packet because I had never shared the computer use policy with you all, but that was one of the things we wanted to accomplish in the year. So I just printed that from the website, but you can do that and other policies there. And certainly if you did read it and had questions you can ask, but the team worked on that here. This was started actually before I got here, and then it kind of just dissolved for some reason. Maybe when my predecessor left, I don't really know, but it got resurrected and we went through there. But this is like many things here. When I came on board here, there were very few policies, and you kind of need them. Like I'm not a fan of them, but when you have to, at least it's a way to justify when you make decisions or have to explain something to somebody. So they're all generally fairly simple, in that sense. So that's one of the items. One of the other items that I wanted to address is also in there, also starting long before I got here, was working with the school district on using importing student IDs so that you get access to digital materials, primarily databases and things that this district doesn't have. So I've talked about this before here. I had some encouraging meetings with the district librarian and a couple other staff. They had gotten everything in place before I was here, everything in the background to make it work and to import them. And the next thing was to test and do some beta testing, and they chose a couple of schools and had some process to get parental signatures for that, which I understand, or at least in that form I understood, because they were trying to get these IDs to work as a full library card, so also physical collections. And I think that was a roadblock, and my understanding, the way it was explained to me, was the parent signatures, they could only get that within a certain finite time period for some reason. I'm not sure how things work there. I'm not going to pretend to know, but it was almost like the way I envision that is like, here, the school year started, we have this, you need to sign this in 2 weeks, otherwise it's off the table kind of thing. And I might definitely be just explaining that wrong, but there was something like that. Like it wasn't just any time you could opt into it. So they were having trouble getting participation to really test it, and that's where it almost dissolved. So I brought it back up, had some encouraging meetings with that, and said, I don't think the goal should be collections. That's different. I mean, we're trying to just give access to databases and things the district doesn't have. Probably more applicable to high school kids, and maybe middle school, so you can probably leave the elementary kids out as far as, what about concerns about content they can access.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving this. So in the end, the last communication I had was, sorry, I'm really dragging this out, but this is intentional because you're here.
Yes, go for it.
Susie. So the thought was, with what I explained, and I posed the question because I did this in a previous job. If we're not trying to get full access to the library and it's just databases, can it be more of an opt-out rather than an opt-in? So every kid has access, but if you don't like that, then just say no, and then we won't import them. So I thought that looked good, but a couple of administrators were not happy with that.
Yeah.
So I just said, well, that's too bad, and offered to chat with anybody further.
Yeah.
Not trying to change your process, but maybe I can still explain why I think that could work. But even so, what's the process for getting signatures? How could that be streamlined so that it works? So that you can get the signatures in the way you want, and then we could move forward with it. So right now, the status of this is almost more, from what I could tell from the district librarian, as well. In that case, if we can't do opt-out, I don't think this is going to work. And I just said, well, that's too bad, for many reasons, and I gave some other ideas of how it could work. But I haven't heard anything, and it was no small task to get a meeting with some of these administrators, and Helen Robbins is the district librarian.
Okay.
She got all that arranged, but that even took a while. So I think to get another meeting is probably. Anyway, that's where that stands. I would love to find a way to explain this to somebody so that they could see how it would work differently. Also, one of the things that we changed with this go around was, well, let's just do high school students, because from what I understood from the district librarian was that with high school students, they don't place restrictions. And Libby is a good example of this, because the school has a separate Libby program called Sora, and that already filters content, which is great if you're of a certain age that you can't get it. But what I understood is the high school students don't have that restriction. So while they can do Sora content, they actually get the full breadth of Libby. So I'm like, well, then why do you need signatures for high school kids? They're already accessing this. So what difference does it make then if they're getting database access, which would probably really help? Question on the floor?
No, I hadn't thought about
Okay.
that, about why they do that. It's because you want to have documented somehow that if something were to come up that a parent was unhappy with,
Sure.
you have something to show, well, you knew
Right.
that they would have access.
I agree, and that's why I personally think an opt-out could work, because I feel like it's a different type of library access. If they want a card and check out collections, then they just have to follow the public library's normal process, which requires a parental signature.
I also don't know why it has to be so different from the process that some of our schools in the district use to notify parents of upcoming health curricula. I.e., I receive an email that says, dear parent, your child, your student will be assigned this course in whatever, however many weeks, and we're gonna teach this thing, and if you wish to opt your child out, click here, and it is a Google form, and I type my name in, that I give permission or whatever, and
That's true.
That's
Even Blue Sky Bridge in elementary school was opt out.
It is not opt-out anymore.
Oh, it is. You have to.
They had to sign a permission slip.
Did I? I really thought it was opt out.
It used to be opt-out,
Okay.
because we have it in, our third graders
Yep.
get it every year.
Yep.
So, there was a period of time where it was opt-out, and then we were notified this past year when they came that we had to have signatures. And I'm almost wondering if it's, outside groups, so like if that course is happening within the school already.
yes,
So it's
Yes.
within the school realm.
It is.
But then you have outside organizations like Blue Sky.
Right. So are they
or
considering
Grit
the
or-
library an outside group? Because I mean, I think of like.
Yeah.
We are.
Right. I mean, I never was, given the lowdown on Sura, but basically, like, they send out that, hey, the iPads are coming home, here's what's happening. And you understand that, and then at some point, they do send out communication that, like, we'll go through each app with your child, don't work ahead. But that's, and Sura is one of them, but yeah, there's not an opt-in or opt-out for even iPads, and you know that there's lots of apps on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, iPads just happen.
Yeah.
Well,
So.
anyway, I'm just primarily giving you a status, but kind of with some hope that people that know people
Yeah,
can talk to people.
I can.
It's like, because it's just like all the work's been done.
Yes.
The hard part's done.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what's hard is finding a method to import this stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like I think in its initial inception, we were trying to import their student ID number, of course, but also their name and stuff. I said, we don't need their name.
No.
We can anonymize that. We don't need to know who they are.
Right.
And that'll keep any student privacy because all we do is put in the number and then assign it a name of student one. The only time we would change it is if they came in with their parent because they want a library card. So I don't know. I just I obviously feel somewhat strongly about this
Yeah.
because there are just a lot of students who could probably benefit from that access, and it just streams like that, right? I mean, yes, they're welcome to come to the library and get it, but that's just not a viable option for many.
But it also feels like you feel like communication has been just shut off without like fully explaining why it can't be figured out.
Yeah.
In a way,
Yeah.
you know,
and so then that's the
it was
frustrating
pretty much
part.
what seemed like a strong, and it kind of surprised Helen too after we talked, and then met with a couple people that were whoever they were at the time could see that working. But then when it was pushed forward, it was pretty much a hard like, oh no, we can't do
without
that.
a lot of explanation and without follow-up
Yeah.
conversations.
But that conversation I would love to have.
Did you ask about like just opt out, opt in? In other words, everyone would have to choose A or B?
We
So
didn't
you-
get to that.
You get
No,
a
we
list
didn't.
of yes
No.
and a list of no.
No.
But even like you said, the process of it feeling like there was a finite period of time when they
seemed
could do it.
Yeah, there was like a time period.
And then how were the permissions done? Was it digital? Was it on the rev track? Was it sent in a Google sheet? Was it sent home? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. Definitely, I don't know the process on that end. But from what I could tell from the meetings that I had, my understanding of how it was explained, I'm thinking, man, if I was a parent, this seems complicated. But anyway,
Yeah.
And did you hear a no or a not this year no?
No, I couldn't know.
Interesting. I'd love to know.
this is
So,
John,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, thanks so much for sharing that update. It sounds like there's not too much we can do at this point, but Susie, I'm so glad you're hearing that, and the parents here in the district,
Yeah.
maybe, because to me this is such a I feel like I'm always harping on this with libraries, but it's an equity thing, like getting those kids access without having to physically come to the library,
Yes.
especially thinking of the AP classes. So I don't want to cut discussion, but I don't know how much more we can do with this update at this point.
Yeah, not here, but I think what I am going to do, in case, Susie, there's anything you think from your
Yeah.
end, since you obviously know people there, I'm gonna forward her like the last email communication
Oh
I
yeah,
have,
that
all
would be
these
great.
names are on it,
Okay,
and
okay.
then you can kind of see who it is,
Yes,
because you'll
yeah.
know more than I will.
Okay.
And if there's any
that's the approach
chance
to-
of, you know,
Yeah.
making some arrangement for another conversation, then
Yeah,
you already know
yeah.
I'm open to it.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was kind of this year's, and there's some carryover from the action plan, like some of the staff secure areas, but we're getting progress. I signed a contract to replace our staff doors back there, which was the biggest thing. So that's in the works. Once the doors are in place, all the electrical components were already purchased to basically hook it up and then make it badge access to the back. So that'll be good and go a long way with staff too, who've been wanting this for some time. The children's shelving project, same thing. I just signed off on that estimate. So with any luck, unless there's any delays in ordering all the shelving that's needed and other parts, the consultant is estimating hopefully sometime in April that all that will be here, and then they can schedule the dismantling of our current children's area and then the installation. And that'll work if that holds, because that'll get it done before summer reading, which would be ideal. But it's a big project and we know how that goes, so we'll see what happens. So then kind of moving into this year, I've been thinking and talking a little bit with staff on this year's action plan, and part of what I've given the task of my leadership team of doing is really taking a look at what you're doing and prioritizing things. And this is no secret, it's a result of the election result and my budget going unchanged, which effectively is a cut, just because of increasing cost of things. And I just think that the staff will still continue to do a lot, but I am worried about staff burnout and just continuing to try to sustain the level of service they're providing here, and effectively many people thinking that that's workable. So I'm not looking to do, I really want people to prioritize and think about, you know, how much programming we're doing, you know, what things can we, or should we, and maybe we don't need to. I feel like we do on some level need to really take a hard look at a lot of the services we do, things that take a lot of time. So to give you an example, one of those would be some of the outreach events we do, some of these big events where, you know, where we have a booth or a tent at like Rhythm at Roosevelt, for example, which is a massive event, and the presence there is wonderful, but it's an enormous amount of coordination and work on our part to be there. And that event itself maybe isn't the best idea, but there's other ones, because I think that one, I don't know that we have a choice. But there's other events where we do. And in talking with my outreach coordinator, what's the value of those big events as opposed to other outreach events where we're truly doing programming, like at the schools with PI, and doing really dedicated programming for those kids and really making a connection in a different way, rather than standing at a booth and saying, hi, we're from the library. I don't want to devalue it, but is that something we could table for a minute? And maybe allow us to focus on some other things that and really put value to it. So I'm just giving you a sense of where my mind's at with that and what I've asked the team to think about, which could inform what's in an action plan for this year. So we're still talking about that. I realize it's end of January. That's okay. I didn't present the 2023 action plan to you all until April or May, which it's not my intention. But so that's kind of I think, Cynthia, what I wanted to cover with action plan for now. I'm certainly happy to entertain questions or comments. But
Great, thanks so much, John. I'm glad to hear that you're having that conversation with your leadership staff. And by the way, I'd ask for an org chart to be placed in our packet. So when John says these types of things, we have a sense of who that is within the library. I also concerned about.
Oh, yeah, I see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone asked if
Another
it was
one.
sent. It was I accidentally sent the old version, so you have the updated.
Okay.
You should have received a second communication with an updated version. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, thanks. I'm just I worry about burnout with your staff as well, and unfortunately, that was what you were handed. We did not, the issue did not pass, the ballot measure did not pass, and the budget requests were denied. I was, it was unfortunate to me that one of your requests was for strategic planning, because that's such an important piece of informing priorities. So I hope that you continue to keep us updated. And as far as I'm concerned, I think this is an area where we might be able to communicate, as Jamie was saying, in our role as an advisory board. I think we're going to have to communicate our support to council over that you can't do everything at once and what your priorities will be. So I hope that this will be a continuing conversation. Other comments or questions for John over the action plan piece? Yeah.
I was just curious, how your staff reacted to that. Did it feel really discouraging, or was there a certain just sort of resignation around it? Did they feel all right, moving forward? I'm just curious about the attitude. I would have a hard time stomaching that, I guess. So.
Yeah, and you mean reaction to the election results and/or the budget?
Or just being told, you have to focus on just a couple items. What are your top things?
Yeah, I think, definitely no one's ever been asked that here before, really, to consider what you're taking on and how much. And I think in general, I think when people thought about it, they took it as, I suppose the positive way it was taken from people is people care about our well-being. Even though the reasons informing it are frustrating. And it's a delicate balance because I'm trying to protect staff here. I definitely don't want the Longmont community to think there's some retaliatory kind of thing well, you voted no, therefore I'm taking all this stuff away. That's not it at all. But it just, we've been going along and hoping every year either we get the budget we need, and then this year it was the budget we need plus a new library, and we're just not getting there. And so I think it was really more taken as that, Catherine, and so but it's also hard to make choices, and you've kind of gotten used to doing a lot of things. So how do you choose that? And I'm not necessarily going to dictate it, but I want to see what people say about that. Some of it's going to happen naturally. It's not about programming or services. Collections is the best example. Our collection budget, of course, remained the same amount, but with increasing costs, it's essentially a cut. So we will be spending a lot less on collections, and that will reveal itself to the community on some level, particularly people that are, inclined to be interested in bestsellers or things like that already have hold lists. Well, those hold lists are going to now increase. You're going to be waiting longer. I can't help it. That's just something that's going to happen. You know what I mean? So that's not us making a choice. I'm not going to reallocate any funding to increase that because it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah. So, it's just going to stay until that can get resolved. But thank you for asking that.
Other comments or questions surrounding the action plan updates? Okay. Well, thanks for that, John, and we'll just continue with your director's report.
Okay. Yeah, so for I'm looking at my notes that I wanted to bring up. I think I did some of that under that.
Little notes.
I know, I was capturing notes of
Oh,
what I wanted to address, and I think I did most of it in the action plan. But there was one thing I wanted to bring up related to our request for reconsideration, right? The challenge where the public has the right to challenge materials in the collection. We've talked about before because of the current climate in this country in general with book banning and censorship. So I wanted to mostly update the board on some things going on in this world. So internally, we've been talking a lot here about our current request for reconsideration form. It started with the conversation of it's outdated, we need to kind of update this and minimally to include programs and displays because those are other things that people have and do challenge, not just books or other materials. And so we've had some discussions and researched other libraries. And in talking with a couple of these libraries in the state that I've connected with through my regional directors groups that I'm on, a couple of libraries are just removing this formal process entirely. And my first reaction was kind of how you just looked at me, Jamie. Like, wait, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I started to think about this and talking with some of these people. Now, removing the process doesn't mean you're removing that you're removing a voice of someone that wants to express concern.
To my defense, John, my reaction internally was in favor of what?
Well,
Right?
a conversation.
Not
So,
like you can't do that, but
Yeah.
like what are you replacing?
and what other
with?
forms do you have? So it's like, because right now it's, we have this form, right? And they have to fill it out in person, or they have to get it in person. It has all these instructions and then a whole process. Like, okay, if you're going to turn this in, we're going to form a committee, then you'll get a response in this amount of time, and blah, blah, blah. So that's fine, but in talking to some of these other libraries, it's like, well, who created this process? We put this on ourselves as public libraries. No one ever asked us to do this. And I get it that we're a public library and people who use it are taxpayers, and so you kind of get into that area of conversation. But removing this formality, and one of the problems I see with this formality is, even though you have to put your name on it, it's essentially an anonymous way to do it. And it opens the door to outside groups to do it. Because we also don't require you to be a resident or have a library card currently. So those are some of the conversations we've had. But this other director I talked to said, who removed it, he said, I removed the whole form. If someone wants to talk about a book they have a problem with, my door's open all the time, and we have board meetings that always have public comment. And I would rather just have a conversation with you about it rather than accept this form and I give a written response. Let me, and I think it's coming from somewhat of an education response. Like, let me explain to you why we have this and many other things, like that stuff that we all know here on the board. So I'm just contemplating this because it is kind of a cumbersome process. And what he has learned and what this other person who's newer to it has learned, that it reduces, if you're, one of the directors is an area that's more inclined to get challenges because of where he lives, a fairly conservative area, just, that's just generally what happens. Like Bible Belty, it used in Colorado for whatever that means. And it's really reduced it because either people really don't want to take the time to come meet with him. Well, that's your prerogative, or they do, and he has a conversation with them, and he's had some conversations where people then truly learn the process and understand that as library professionals, we're trained to select. I mean, there's a whole thing. So,
Like teachers.
Yeah. I know. And it's not that you can't have an opinion about it,
Yeah.
right?
Go
It's
check
just-
it out.
It's just how are you providing them that form or that format to, we call it a challenge, but whatever you want to call it. So I'm just, I guess I'm just letting you know that there's kind of like on a statewide, there's some rethinking of this. Internally, that's informing internally. So even though we've been talking internally about revising this, and by the way, one of those revisions, if we keep it in its form, we will rewrite this to require that you live in Longmont and that you have to have a library card.
That's great.
Yeah.
There's been some debate on the library card side because, you know, if you're a Longmont resident, your taxes are still paying for this library. Why should I have to have a card just to have an opinion on a book? And I'm not, I just, after talking with a bunch of people, I just decided it makes sense. You know, I mean,
It makes sense
to
to
have,
have one?
to require it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thought on that is that I'm kind of thinking worst case scenario, right? Like what if something hits and there's like a big surge in resistance or protests in a particular area, a particular title, etc. What happens if a group of individuals wish to mount some sort of coordinated front, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean to staff who require an in-person conversation? And what if you don't require a library card? What stops a group who may have members, all of them may live in Longmont, but they normally would not engage with library staff except with the sole purpose of making sure these titles aren't available in any way? Like, I don't know if I'm phrasing it right. Like, their motives aren't the same as a person who uses the library and notices, hey, what's going on here? You know, this doesn't seem to fit with, you know, what I believe this library to be. I don't know. It just feels like it's a little easier to just be like, all right, today we're going to get this book removed because I read on this website that it's bad. So we're going to go. And they don't really have, it's like the same reason why so many libraries require that the person has read the book or could point to the specific page or passage that is offensive instead of just going by hearsay.
And our form asks that question.
Well, my understanding is that most book challenges across the country right now are from outside residents.
I'm thinking Moms for Liberty.
Right.
Yeah,
Where
that's,
they parachute in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially if the form is available online, which I'm glad it's not, then you don't even have to show
I was
up in
gonna look it
person.
up.
I actually Googled it
Oh,
here.
did you?
I did
Okay.
Longmont Library challenge a book, and you do have it in the policy section. It says you have to come in person to request the form.
yeah.
And so would you just update it to say, come and speak to us, or?
Depending what
If
it
you
would
were to
look
go
like.
that
You know, if
route.
you have a concern about an item, then please contact the director, and the library board meets on the third.
I mean, I think as
whatever.
long as it still says it somewhere in the
Yeah.
policies
Where
of
people-
how to go about doing
Yeah.
it, I think that's the due diligence.
And a form doesn't preclude a conversation either.
That's true.
I wanted to share that, and John, I know you and your staff have obviously done this in much greater depth, but I did do some looking around of local area libraries, and I was surprised at the breadth of ways people handled this. In one library close by us, there was not that statement. You know, like there was just nothing I could find about how to challenge. In one, I really appreciated. It says upon resolution of a challenge, the challenge library material, exhibit, display, or program cannot be re-challenged by any individual within one calendar year.
Oh, that's good too.
So, just saying that, really, I think that I thought that there would have been more of a standard than there is. So I think that if
Which is to
Yeah.
my point of we've created it ourselves, so
Yeah,
we've created it
yes.
differently.
Yeah, thanks for bringing
The
it up.
only, the only
Cynthia.
standard is
Heard.
that is to have some form where someone can express not just their concern about items, but also recommend, which, you know, let's not forget that's part of this too. Yes,
and you
sorry.
Patrick.
Did someone just draw?
I don't want to come across as second guessing their instincts at all, but one just thought I had was, if it's a form plus conversation, does the form in some ways serve to kind of like weed out people who just need to like vent? You know what I mean?
Potentially.
Are you going to end up with a lot of kind of low-level complaints versus the people who are like really serious about this and want to have a conversation? Like, I just worry about your time, and is there a way in which like a kind of like an initial intake form might protect you from some kind of people who are like constant complainers, or you know what I mean? Like,
No, I think it's a good point, and
I
something
just fear the complaint and then like invite follow-up for some of them or something, or I don't know.
No, I think it's a good point and something to consider, you know, at the end of the day. You know, maybe it is some combination. I mean, I'm happy to say that, you know, this library, in my time here, and I have one I'll share tonight, this is my third in a year of somebody challenging something. We don't get an influx of this here. It's kind of setting yourself up for a worst case scenario, right? Like, and then, or whatever, or just to manage it differently. But we did talk about things like that Cynthia referenced of adding to this. So like an item, a book that has been challenged can't be challenged again by anybody for whatever the rest of the year or 2 years. Also, a person challenging themselves only can do it so many times in a year, so that they can't, you know, that way they're not. That sort of helps protect that influx of a group that might be inclined to just keep submitting forms because, you know, they want everything on. I could see that, Catherine, like having a form and then at least you have to come in and do it that way. And even in our current form, it probably does limit some people, right? Because, or it discourages it on some level because, like, well, they don't want to come in, or a lot of people just want to express that I didn't really like this, and so staff will talk to them and offer this as a solution, and then most people don't follow up. So,
I think maybe the other advantage of a potential hybrid system where there's some kind of form and it's very clear that this is leading to a conversation is a form on paper gives staff a chance to prepare for a conversation, to see what's coming.
So what is it?
It's not like blind. Yeah.
Right.
That's a really good point.
Jen, have you been able to hear from the directors you've talked to who have fully removed the process? Have they run into any roadblocks in terms of time or anything like that?
No, the one that I have a long email from about it, and he's the director down in Woodland Park, which is Brand Park Library District. And I think it's still somewhat new there still, but you know, in his opinion, it's first of all, I don't know that they got a ton either, but it's reduced what they have gotten, and he's felt a lot better about just having conversations with people.
What's the size of that community?
Woodland Park it's small. It's a little mountain town. I mean, it's bigger than your average mountain town, I guess, but
Smaller than us.
yeah, it's just outside of Colorado Springs. So it's that neck of the woods, if you think of the state of Colorado, and where a lot of areas that are probably more prone to challenges are down that way. So I mean, we're still talking about it here. I just wanted to kind of give you.
I like that
a
you're
sense
talking
of-
about it and kind of.
Minimally, we have to revise something.
Yeah, and coming up with kind of minimum standards and,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's great.
Well, I mean, it was when they come in, staff reads through that,
The
reads
form.
through those forms, right? And
Yeah,
how many pages are they?
it's one.
It's just
I
one
mean,
page,
some
okay.
I received 3. One person wrote minimal information on the form, and then they typed up a 3-page essay, which is fine.
Yeah, but the
Gave them a
There's
chance
staff
to really
time.
explain where they're coming from.
staff time it takes to read through all those, you know.
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
my
well,
concern.
yeah, and it's me. So I don't
Yeah.
burden staff with that. I
Okay.
mean, the staff responsibility is if someone objects to something, they offer them my contact information. We don't go just to the form, like, oh, if you don't
Okay.
like this here.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
like, try to talk to them,
And
but you know, if they're adamant or whatever, use your best judgment and say, well, there's a process. You know, here's this packet. What they get is the form, and accompanying it is our collection development policy and the library bill of rights and freedom to read statement. So that, you know, hopefully they might look through that and then reconsider whether they need this, because you know, all of that in and of itself is going to explain why this is in the collection. Just why that guy from Woodland Park, I don't think he even cares what it is. Like, if he's surprised by it, he probably has boilerplate answers for everything that comes in. I don't know. I would probably rather know, in case I had to talk directly to it. Or, of course, what a lot of people think is, oh, you're a librarian, you've read everything in the world.
Right.
You know, so
You've read all the books, yeah.
I don't want to be in that.
Yeah.
So I'll keep this in my director's report as pertinent to keep you updated on what we're doing, particularly if we revise anything I'll bring here. Right now, there's been no changes. The last thing I'll say to this, if you aren't aware, there is some potential legislation from the state to follow what the state of Illinois did, which is basically putting a ban on book bans. And it sounds great, but the initial draft legislation is problematic. And so a directors group met, and I haven't seen, they wanted to write some amendments to it. They wanted, whoever wrote up the initial legislation, in our opinion, added some complications to it and really almost looked like it could get libraries in trouble. More so than, it's almost like poking the bear.
Okay.
That's very vague of me to say. I can certainly send out the legislation, or at least the draft I saw, and what this group, and so in this, with the Colorado Association of Libraries, right? There's all these different groups on there, and one of them is a legislative group, and so they constantly review anything, and they talk to legislatures as it relates to public libraries. So that group has been on top of this legislation and tried to have actual conversations with the people writing it. So I think the positive side of that is having directors engaged in this and providing and engaging in that conversation. Not to say you're doing this all wrong, but think about the implications of what you're doing here, here, and here, or the potential implications. And luckily, a couple of the people on this committee have legal backgrounds, so they can read through this and decipher some of the language more than maybe your average person. So that's kind of handy too. But I can try to set some stuff out, and you can probably look it up too to see draft legislation. But more awareness. You should know that this is going on, and that's as it relates to challenges.
Thanks so much, John. If you could send it out, that'd be great for anyone who's taking notes right now. The bill looks to be SB 24-049, Content and Material in Libraries.
Can you do the numbers again?
SB 24-049.
Thank you.
And then the title, Content and Material in Libraries.
Thanks. within this realm, and then this is the last director's report, which is great. But I did receive a challenge over the weekend that I wanted to just bring here. I've written a draft that. So our current process, if you don't know, if someone does fill in a form, what it says on the form is, if you do this, a committee will be formed who will review this. And it's like, well, what's the committee? Well, the committee is whoever needs to be on the committee, right?
Yeah.
Because if someone, like last time, they challenged a book on the teen display, so I had conversations with my children's librarian and my teen librarian and myself. And that conversation can vary how long. Generally, what I've done with these is I write a draft response, and then in this case, it's a graphic novel, an adult graphic novel. And so one of the selectors from the Adult Services Department, I shared, this was challenged, and I sent her the draft, and I said, that's basically how this committee works, and you can provide some feedback. And pending that, then I'll mail it out to the patron. So, in general, in this case, they're challenging a book called Squeak the Mouse. It's right here, and it's definitely depicts a good deal of violence and sex, just so you know, and that's what they're objecting to. And actually, they're not asking it to be removed from the collection. They just want it moved to the XXX part of the library.
Do we have it?
No. So
Behind the purple curtain.
no library would, and the reason we wouldn't is because we actually don't collect, by definition, pornographic material. This is not pornography.
Okay.
So, so in my draft response, I have explained to this person that it's appropriately shelved in the adult graphic novel section. We don't have that section, nor would we, because by definition we don't collect pornography, and this is not. Also gave a few references to some reviews of it that people liked, and the graphic novelist himself has won 3 different literary awards. So I've pointed these things out, and that basically it's not moving. There's nowhere to move it to, and I'm also not taking it out, and here's why. So that's the essence of it. Just wanted to make the board aware of that. So that's just, I guess, FYI a little bit. I did look through it. This isn't something I would pick up.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't enjoy it. I looked through it because basically, just so you know, that it's an Italian graphic novelist who wrote this in the 80s. It was these underground comics because it's of this nature. So I don't know if you can see on screen, but it's very, you can see from the cartoon, you get an idea of what's in here, right? I mean, it's a mouse with a chainsaw attacking a cat. Okay, if you didn't see that, that's what it is.
Those of us who are Simpsons fans.
Yes, and this is, so,
Yeah,
this
are
is-
not shocked.
so this is, if you're a Simpsons fan, so was it Ren and
Itchy and Scratchy.
Itchy and Scratchy.
Ren and Stimpy did that.
and Ren and Stimpy and Tom and Jerry, if you're an old guy like me.
Yeah. No, those were pretty violent.
Basically,
Yeah. Looking
and
back.
that's every review of this, is basically it's a parody of it, and it's an intentionally graphic, both violently and sexually, because that was the intent. But when he wrote this in the 80s, it was like this underground thing because that was unacceptable. And in fact, it even got caught trying to get into this country, and the authorities got it, and they wouldn't let it in, and it went to court, and the publisher won because they argued it was obscene, and by definition, it's not obscene.
Doesn't meet the Miller test.
It doesn't meet the Miller test. So it actually was never considered obscene.
Okay.
And so now what's in here is basically the whole series bound, right? It was in individual comics, and so it was actually kind of an interesting story to learn about it. So that part was fun. Anyway, so just so you know, the essence of my response is it's not moving. There's nowhere to move it to, and I'm definitely not taking it out of the collection. And if there's any questions or comments on that, I'll entertain it from the board. But that's going to be my next step, is to confer with my collection person and the head of collection and make sure my letter looks good to them from their perspective, and tweak as necessary, and then I'll mail it out.
Very interesting.
Great, thanks so much, John. I think that just is an illustration of how a conversation could be really helpful with that paging.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know if you saw the cover on the screen there, but the reason they even, on the form, the patron has to indicate, you know, what made you aware of this book anyway, or whatever. They said because of the Disney-like cover, which I couldn't help myself in my response saying that it's Disney-like, but from my observation,
It's not.
it's very clear what's in this book.
Yeah.
But also in the adult section.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Pat, for
And it's in
joining
the
us.
adult section, you know. Anyway, in the back,
Oh, yeah, see.
a very brief description tells you that this is extremely violent, both violent, what am I trying to say? Violence and sex.
Yeah.
It's graphic across the board. It's meant to be. So if you're not looking at these things
Mature themes.
and then opening it up and then being shocked at it, anyway, obviously I didn't explain it that way to them, but I did point out.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, well, you know. So yeah, it was kind of interesting to down like Disney.
Yeah.
So that's all on that. Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you very much.
That's all
Any
from my report too.
questions or comments for John about anything else regarding the director's report?
I'm always impressed by how collaborative you are with your staff. It's a great sign,
Thank you.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. I believe next up on our agenda is the Friends of the Library report.
Yes, it was so long ago because the Friends meet, I think, most of the time it's like a few days after our meeting. So I'm going back to December 20th where the Friends Board formally reviewed the outcome of the last book sale in mid-December. The library wound up generating more sales revenue than originally thought, which was lovely. And so, of course, I had to get on my soapbox yet again and say I have such concerns for this wonderful group of volunteers who put in so many hours to run these sales, to sort and organize the books. They put so much care into getting these books ready for the sale or ready for the bookshop. That bookshop is like doing so well with bringing in funds. How sustainable is it? Especially as we head into a year where the library has less purchasing power with their budget. So I don't have a solution at this point, you know. I encourage the board of the Friends to not forget about legacy planning, not forget about recruiting a diverse team of members and board members, that so that there is somebody to step up as board members step away. I think that was just the main point. They may need to do more this year to reach the levels that the library, how do I want to say this? To have the same impact this year as they did in 2023.
Can I interject? So, related to that, because I want to acknowledge this publicly, given the budget and my desire, one of those things was to increase our professional development. And there's a pretty major conference that is this year that only happens every other year. So obviously, with the current situation, I wouldn't be able to support that. So I went to the Friends and requested them to fund 5 people to go to this conference, which they did really without hesitation. I am very grateful for that. It's still, it's something I really wish I wasn't asking the Friends for. To me, it's a standard, and I know the Friends know that. I'm just expressing it here, but at the same time, there will be some staff going to this conference in April. Public Library Association is probably one of the biggest shows for public libraries, and anytime I've been, it's been valuable.
What's
So I
the
just
name of
wanted
the
to
conference again?
Public Library Association.
Great, thank you, John and Jamie. Jamie, did you have other updates surrounding the Friends, or was that your
No,
update?
that was the most significant thing. They're going to be focusing, of course, now on the February sale, and also, what were they looking at? Something like meaty. Oh, they want to revisit their member benefits. They would love to have more members join the Friends, and I think they are realizing, that they might want to review what that $15 a year gets them, because that's how a lot of the public thinks. It's like, what am I going to get for this donation? What am I going to get for this? It's the fact that it's called a membership rather than a donation, like soliciting donations versus recruiting members. So when I have more to say about that, I'll let you know.
I was muted. Thanks for attending and bringing that report back to us. I'm so glad to hear that 5 members are able to go to the public library conference. I know that's not been the standard in this library, and I just cannot reiterate in my opinion how important that is. And I will just take this moment to repeat what we've all said before, is we're so grateful for the Friends' support, and it's so unfortunate that needs to be coming from them, because ideally their role should be supplementing, not providing core functions. So I really appreciate all the work that those members do. Okay, moving on. Susie, do you have anything for the City Council liaison update?
Yeah, so, again, we're at the point, of the year where a lot of legislative bill recommendations will be coming to council for, for support or proposed opposition. I'm pulling up. So we have some bills that are coming down. The City Council did vote to support the HB 24-1012, which is concerning the operational efficiency of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And so, and then the other one that we also supported was around concerning railroad safety. So I know the city, we have been engaged a lot with BNSF Railroad, with RTD, around the fast tracks. So one of the things that we'll be discussing in an executive session is really looking at our Longmont's continued participation in fast tracks, and possibly looking for other ways to support public transit for Longmont, Boulder, and to Denver. But I think it's really time for us to hold RTD accountable, and if that's and talking with legal on ways that we could actually try to recover some funds coming to the library. Wishful thinking. But, so, yeah, so kind of rethinking those pieces. So I think that's something that has impact to us as a community as a whole. Another thing that's coming down, so staff had no position on this bill. Council, we have yet to discuss this item, but it's around universal health care. So we're delving more into what that bill would mean, the ramifications for employees and sustainability. So that's something that will be coming up to look for discussion as well. And if anyone has, thoughts, definitely shoot me an email, so we can bring that up for our discussion as well. And then, so it sounded like, so I had attended a legislative breakfast with Community Solutions. So we got to hear from the governor and several state representatives and senators who are doing work around transit. And it sounded like the three big things that the state is focusing on is affordable housing, transportation, and climate. So I was very disheartened not to hear public education in there. But one of the things I mentioned is how, okay, so for example, I talked to people at the airport, and the challenge they're facing is that there aren't incoming people to do, mechanical work on the airplanes. So as a lot of these people are aging out, we don't have new people coming into that profession. So how many of these things that we're addressing, climate, the switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, are the new people coming in? Well, if we adequately fund public education, then we can really build that robust pathway to these professions that are, that could be considered dying out. Or these newer professions that are kind of phasing in. So like the transition to renewable energy. So it's new technologies, new expertise. So how, kind of how we can connect those, our priorities at the local level and connect it to what the state is prioritizing. And I'm not saying that City of Longmont is not prioritizing affordable housing, transit, or climate, but there are other needs and priorities we have as well, and how we can kind of coalesce those together. And I'm trying to think. So outside of council, it is part of my work on council. So I'm part of the Jump 529. So it's that program for this city and the district have agreed to, or the Ed Foundation, give each child coming from kinder to third a $50 to put into a Jump 529 account for college. So then, parents can put in as little or as much as they want to that account. It'll accrue money, and then so when they're ready to go to college, they have, a little bird nest, so to carry on. One of the things in reviewing that is the inequity that has really come to play is the only people that have really tapped into it are people who of needs. So
people who already had accounts even.
Yes. So we do not have Title I participants in Title I schools. And so earlier today I had a meeting with them, and one of the things, and so I'm bringing this out here too, because there's, maybe opportunity to, for that team to kind of utilize space in here, or, an event or something that would allow people to kind of be educated on that realm. And so we have a lot of people who don't really understand what the ins and outs, what that means. So they're not taking up on that opportunity. So we're looking for ways to kind of close that gap, that equity gap. And so that's something that's kind of coming out in the community. And so I think, when we talk about, having these collaborations with the district, there's so much we could do if we work together rather than being in these silos. And so that's you know, the whole reason why I brought that up was just thinking about the early conversation we had about even the IDs and for access to the library. There's so many ways that we can fill in these gaps if we all work together. So that, you know, I think that's an opportunity.
Is that literally just for college?
So so one of the things that I'm learning, so I'm going to a training on it
Wow.
to really find out, because I think there is a possibility for students to use that money for trade school.
Yep.
So like if they go to vocational, they can access that. They
Yeah,
can
like to be an
confirm that.
airplane mechanic.
Yes, because not everyone is going to go to a four-year university. That
Right.
might not be their thing, but if they have money to be able to
Apply it
invest
somewhere else.
to a
yeah.
vocational. I mean, my husband's a plumber, and he's seen it's like there's no younger people who know the trade. And it's frightening. I mean, he's almost 60, and he's out there, you know, lifting up 500-pound water heaters upstairs and all that, because there aren't people to do it. So, yeah, filling in those gaps. And does anyone have any questions for me? I have been taking notes. Every month we do update each other on our advisory boards. So I do want to drive the point home that friends, and I've talked to residents too about this. It was like, well, you know, we're content with the library. Okay, well, think about a lot of the programs and things that are essential that are paid for by the Friends of the Library. Where in other cities, their friends are paid for additional reasons.
Yes.
And then they were like, oh, I didn't know. And, you know, then speaking with a former candidate, he goes back, he goes, yeah, I didn't really research it. Just don't say anything.
Yes.
Don't say anything. So it's very frustrating to hear some of these comments after the fact. And I really was upset, and I understand, you know, the policy that we have to kind of remain neutral as a city. But I kind of think we were like, as us as an organization, we were maybe erring on the side of caution too much. I think there was a little more we could have. I think I'm talking city council. I don't know. But, okay.
Hey, thanks so much, Susie, for that update.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on that one? And I really appreciate you sharing and bringing some of that back. Right, well, the next standing item is library news, library profession news. Thanks, John, for sharing about that bill up for the 2024 state session earlier. I don't have anything else. Anyone else have anything in the big picture of library world?
I missed last month, but did we discuss the library district that Frederick, Firestone, or Dacono voted on in the last election cycle to be included in?
We didn't talk about it.
No, I'm just curious. I didn't realize, first of all, that they would have to vote as citizens to be included in a library district. And why would you vote against that? Like, what is the reasoning?
Because it's a tax increase.
Oh.
It's money.
Gotcha.
Whether it's a district or like we did, which was increased funding, it's either property and or sales and use tax. So it always boils down to that. You can't just be a district without paying for it.
Okay.
Is that High Plains?
No, Dacono
Dacono.
was, and I don't remember the result
Did it
of it.
pass?
I don't
very
remember
close.
it was so close. I think it was
Yeah.
going back for a count.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened.
So I
It
don't.
may not have passed. It would have been a hard time to pass something like that, although we saw that Boulder did, but that was after, first of all, that wasn't this election, that was earlier, but it was still in the same, but that was years of preparing and, it took them a while to, and even then it was close.
Okay.
So,
I have a subjective question, and it's for John. Just in light of our conversation tonight, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to share from your opinion, perspective about, do you have similar concerns for the future about people leaving librarianship and not enough people coming into it. Maybe perhaps because of some of the events that have been appearing in the media, some of the challenges, you know. Do you think that's going to discourage people from entering the field and then eventually having a challenge to replace staff?
Currently, it's not affecting it. A lot of people still go. I mean, the real concern is who's going, and it's still largely white people.
Of course.
And so that needs to change.
Yes.
And that's been a long-standing thing, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know that. But the other interesting part, and since this was a subjective question, because I don't have data to present this, but my sense is that a lot of people, a good share of people that decide to go get their master's in library and information science are career changers, and there's something that's quote unquote sexy about doing it. Like they like, it's like the age-old thing, right? Because I love to read, so obviously I want to work in a library. And then they're quickly educated once they kind of get into place there, which begs the question of what's being taught in library school, and I have a lot of thoughts on that goes well beyond this question. But currently, I would say there's a lot of interest, but I think that's part of it. I think people still see it as romantic, at least in a public library. You know, and just not aware of all the realities. And you'd have to be somewhat aware with all this censorship and stuff going on. But I don't know. A lot of people are still enrolling.
I mean, that's good for the
Yeah.
profession. I've read a number of first-person sort of memoirs or accounts of former librarians, and I was surprised at how many of them ended with that person leaving the field, not because of censorship, but because of some of safety.
Oh,
Safety
huge
reasons.
problem. Which is and that's the other thing. I think if a lot of the people that come into library school as career changers without knowing a lot of the inner workings, they might reconsider, unfortunately, based off safety alone. Particularly that's not every library, but generally the bigger the city, the more urban you get, you know, there's more concerns for that.
I was looking for this account, a librarian I just started following on Instagram, and I am just loving that feed, and it's very positive, inspiring, and I can't find it right now. So
Well, please do.
I'm not trying to be rude, but if I find it, I will bring that back to this group,
Yeah.
because if you have an Instagram account, it might just bring a smile to your day.
I'm wondering, and I don't want to take us off track, but if there was a recent profile in the New York Times of a librarian who had a popular Instagram, TikTok account, whose focus was on, as he called it, spreading library joy.
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, okay.
Remember them?
I'll find it. It's
Talking about,
Library.
It was in the New York Times.
Yep, he's in the New York Times. He's a California librarian. He also talks a lot about mental health.
That
I think.
might be the name of the account too.
Anyway, okay. Any other comments from the library board? Okay, well then, our next meeting is scheduled for February 26th. I hope to be in person. My husband has a new job, and I might be joining more often over Zoom, depending on how late he's working. But I hope to see you all in person, and we'll go ahead and adjourn at 8:29.